It goes without saying, but this video will contain spoilers for the first two seasons of Mushoku Tensei, so if you haven't seen them, you'll want to click off and come back later. Mushoku Tensei is simultaneously one of the most beloved and one of the most controversial anime in recent memory. It's kind of like sour cream. You either love it or you hate it. Fans of the series will praise its writing, world building, animation, and characters, while detractors will point to fan service, Rudius's behavior, and quote unquote problematic elements of the story as negative. The most recent of which being the incorporation of slavery into the story and Rudius's actions from a recent episode where he buys a slave. Of course, tourists took to everyone's favorite social media site, Twitter, now known as X, and started harassing the author to the point he had to make a public statement explaining that he doesn't support slavery. Something like this that should be rather obvious having to be said is honestly pretty sad to say the least, but here we are. While it may be the most recent controversy, it's far from the first with Mushoku Tensei. Going back to the first season, there's been criticism mainly from the Western fan base about major aspects of the story, such as how down bad Rudius is, Paul's behavior towards Lilia, Rudius being attracted to girls, among other things. People have always found ways to complain. I want to make it clear that criticism of a series is fine. It's okay to not like how a series handles a topic or to not want to watch something that has said topic. It becomes an issue when you cross from criticizing the work to attacking the person writing it. Throwing around terms like pedophile and attacking the author for creating a fictional world with fantastical elements is unacceptable, and we have to continue calling out those who engage in that type of behavior, especially when they clearly have not even made an attempt to understand the story or the context. Perhaps the funniest part of everything is that the people who supposedly hate this pedo series continue watching it week after week for nearly 2 years now. It's almost like it's not so bad after all. If you didn't know already, Mushoku Tensei is an isekai, meaning it takes place in another world with a different standard of living and different values. Like most isekai, it features medieval European concepts like slavery, racism, and a class system. The inclusion of these things is faithful to the time period that the series is based on and doesn't mean that the author agrees with people participating in buying slaves or being racist to certain tribes. If it's hard to watch those things, that's good. That means that society has moved well beyond that. However, these were the things that happened for most of human history. Rudius purchasing a slave a couple episodes ago sent people into a frenzy since he's originally from a world where slavery is illegal. He should know better, right? Well, obviously. That said, Rudius is a teenager both mentally and physically at this point in the story, and it's really unreasonable to think that he's gonna totally systemically dismantle the slave trade and totally change the world on his own. The best thing that he can do at this point in time is really what he did, save one person at a time. When he found her in that cage, Juliet had been abused for a very long time. Giving her a safe space to live, food, and training is hardly an evil thing to do. Controversial topics are often included in fantasy stories as they can lead to important discussions and reflections on these subjects. These elements can act as a mirror to society, encouraging viewers to consider their own beliefs and biases. Being an isekai also means Mushoku Tensei has your usual wish fulfillment bait, which isn't a knock on it. I'm into that type of stuff. It just is what it is. A loser shut in being reincarnated into another world, falling for and perving on girls is nothing new. We get tons of those every year. What makes Mushoku set up a point of contention is that Rudius is originally a 34-year-old man who's reborn and goes after younger girls. Now, I'm gonna be honest, as a massive Mushoku fan, it is definitely a little weird on the surface, and I can understand why some people would feel a little uneasy about that. However, like consuming any piece of fiction, you need to have a little bit of media literacy here. In his past life, Rudius was emotionally and mentally stunted as he was bullied and dropped out of school, staying in his room constantly for almost 20 years. So while he may be 34 in physical age, his mental age is much closer to that of a child than a grown man. What makes relationships like that messed up in real life is that there is a mental developmental imbalance between a child and an adult. Rudius does not have the mind of an adult, so that doesn't exist here. Rudius is basically the equivalent of taking a dude who's been in his mom's basement for 20 years and throwing him into a world with people who, for the first time ever, actually find him attractive and give him the time of day. Like if you've seen those memes of a guy going into sunlight for the first time and just melting because they haven't seen the light of day, that's basically Rudius. So we're not dealing with someone who has a full deck of cards here. This is someone with zero social skills who's not felt a woman's touch since he was a child. We as the audience know a lot of the stuff that he's doing is creepy and wrong, but that's because our morality has been defined by our cultural and social norms. Big emphasis on social here, meaning interacting with people. A shut-in would not have that. It's like the old thought experiment of whether a person who has not been taught that stealing is wrong has actually done something wrong by stealing. The consensus is usually no, because that's not something you come out of the womb knowing. You have to be taught that. Again, that doesn't mean that you have to like that aspect of Mushoku or every aspect of the series. I'm a fan of the series, but I'm not blindly beholden to it. For example, I'm not a fan of Rudius's obsession with Roxy's underwear. It's supposed to be a funny gimmick that's brought up time and time again, but it just comes off as cringe to me. However, again, going back to media literacy, which has become somewhat of a lost art these days, I'm able to understand that by giving him this obsession, the author has further emphasized his stunted mental development. He latches onto a literal pair of underwear not just because he's down horrendously, but because of his abandonment issues from his previous life. Throughout the series, we see Rudius being very protective of mementos from people he cares about. These mementos allow him to feel connected to those people despite their distance. Roxy's underwear, keeping Eris's hair after she leaves him, among other things. This is why him burning Eris's hair in the beginning of this most recent season of the anime is so important. It symbolizes him moving on to a new stage of his life and letting the past go. This is something that we call character development, something that people supposedly care about yet hate seeing apparently. Rudius is by no means a perfect character, and I'm not implying that in the slightest. By any objective measure, he's probably not a great guy, but he also isn't evil or pure bad. Like most people in real life, he's somewhere in the middle. Real life is filled with imperfect and complex individuals, and incorporating this into a story can provide depth and relatability to characters that would otherwise be one-dimensional. You know, those same one-dimensional characters that y'all hate for being generic, overpowered main characters. Personally, I don't want to watch a show with a goody-goody two-shoes main character who does everything by the book and takes the high road constantly. It's boring and doesn't allow me to connect with them. I want someone who's a little messed up in the head and gradually evolves into a decent person over time. It makes the journey so much more satisfying when you can visibly see the character grow over the course of a series. The story never glorifies Rudius's behavior either. He's presented as a complex individual with both strengths and weaknesses. This nuanced portrayal can make characters more relatable and serve as a reflection of human nature. While we may not be doing the things that Rudius does, I can guarantee we all have character flaws that we know are bad and need to be improved. One of my favorite aspects of the series is how, while fantastical, it shows somewhat realistic depictions of people. Good people can do bad things and bad people can do good things, and I love how it's handled in Mushoku, making it one of my favorite series ever. Speaking on fan service more broadly, it's something that really is a big cultural thing for Japanese animation, light novels, and manga as a whole. If you're not too familiar with Japan, it's one of the loneliest places in the world, has a toxic work culture, a declining population, and a number of other social issues. That's not to shit on Japan. I love the country despite its flaws. I say that to explain the prevalence of the trope in the medium. Mushoku Tensei and other isekai are popular because they provide a depressed segment of the population the opportunity to escape the mundane and depressing reality that they live in. The concept of getting another shot in life, going back to days before the pressures of work and responsibilities set in, and starting over is one of the most appealing concepts in fiction. Reading and watching an isekai is almost therapeutic in a sense for many. That fan service touch is something that adds to the escapism and allows people to just turn their minds off and have fun after a long shift in the office. Western society by and large doesn't have the same social issues as Japan, so a lot of Westerners, especially the younger ones who are often complaining online, couldn't begin to understand the need to include harems or big anime boobas swinging. But I promise you, the fan service in Mushoku Tensei and anime in general does serve a purpose. Maybe not to you, but a purpose nonetheless. On the other hand, there's also the argument that sex sells. So myself and many other people who don't have toxic work cultures just want to see hot anime girls because they're nice to look at. That's really all there is to it. It's all artistic expression at the end of the day, which needs to be protected. Whether or not you agree with said artistic expression, it's still a means by which an author can express themselves, and if we take that freedom away, every story just becomes the same. The key with fan service is just making sure that it doesn't overpower the story and that it strikes a balance with its deeper narrative elements, which of course Mushoku Tensei has no problem with. The complexity of the six-faced world is immense. There's so much lore you could genuinely take a class on it in Mushoku Tensei. From the types of magic, the different races, to the gods, to sword styles, to the history of the nobility and countries, there's no shortage of love and care that went into crafting this world. There is a reason it's known as the godfather of isekai, and Studio Bind were literally created just to adapt it. It does what very few other series have, capture the true sense of wonder that a fantasy world offers. So what I've tried to do, and I hope I did well in this video, is push back against some of the biggest criticisms against Mushoku Tensei as a story. Again, it's not perfect. I'll be the first to admit there's some things I would change if I were writing it, But even with its flaws, it's without a doubt one of the best series in the medium and a great tale of personal growth and redemption, featuring lovable characters, drama, action, and a truly magical world that lets you escape yours, even if only for a little. Thank you for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel for more anime videos. I'll see you on the next one.